What's going on, guys? This is Chris on the Boys Podcast, and today I want to talk about a gaming memory. And this is going to be a new little series I'm going to start up where I'm going to talk about some gaming memories throughout the years that I've, been through and experienced. And this memory, I'm going to talk about how I got my first Game Boy, which incorporates me getting my first Pokemon game. So, we grew up in Toronto, inner city Toronto, and we were moving hour and a half north to a small town at the time called Innisfil, and we were finally moving into a house. We're getting our own backyard. We're getting, our own bedrooms. I have two other brothers, and we were living in a smaller apartment in the time in inner city Toronto. So we were moving up there, and I remember, we moved up there. We were unpacking. We were starting to, fill up the house. And I remember just going out and sitting on the front steps and playing with my wrestling toys, and that was something I always did. I was lucky enough that every week we would always go to Walmart. My dad would always buy me a wrestling toy or a pack of Pokemon cards. And we used to beg my dad all the time for, can we get a Game Boy? Can we get a Game Boy? Because we really wanted to play those Pokemon games, but he just never had that kind of money because he would have to buy 3 of them because it would have to be for me and then for my 2 brothers. So we never got it. So I remember, it was a couple days after we moved into the house, and I had seen some of the kids on the street, but we were kind of wary of each other because we were there was only maybe 1 or 2 colored families that moved up to the small town, and we were one of them. And it was very white dominated at the time. Not saying it was anything racist, but I think it was just like a mixture of we were kind of nervous to kind of connect at the time. And I remember just sitting on my steps outside and just playing with my wrestling toys, and one of the boys came up, and he later became one of my good friends growing up, and his name was Rick. And he was like, hey, what's your name? And I was like, I'm Chris. He's like, hi, I'm Rick. And he's like, that's Justin, and that's DJ, and he's like, you guys want to come hang out with us? And I went over there, hung out with them, and they're like, hey, we're just playing Game Boy. And they were all playing Game Boy and playing the Pokemon games, and I was just sitting there, watching them. And they're like, oh, you're in the wrestling? And we were talking about wrestling a little bit. They were in the wrestling as well, and they had lots of Pokemon cards. And I ran in and got my Pokemon cards, and we're looking through the Pokemon cards, and Rick was like, hey, do you not have a Game Boy? And I'm like, no, I don't have a Game Boy. We only have an N64. And he's like, oh, hold on a second. So he went inside, and he brought out the old school brick original Nintendo Game Boy. And he's like, here, play this. And then he gave me Pokemon Blue to play. And that evening, we just sat all evening playing, Pokemon all together. And they were showing me how to go through the game, and showing me how to go through the caves, and making sure I got Flash, and just guiding me through this game I've been wanting to play for a very long time. And it was dinner time, our parents were calling us, and I gave him back the Game Boy. I was like, hey man, thank you so much. And he's like, no, that's yours. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I want you to keep that. I'm like, I can't keep this. He's like, no, go ahead, keep it. We got the Game Boy Colors. I want you to keep that. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much. And then he gave me Pokemon Blue, and he said, now I want you to keep this as well. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, you can keep it. And Rick had a lot of stuff. Rick's parents, I guess, were at the time were recently divorced, and his dad was buying him a lot of stuff. And I remember even going to his house when he invited me over the next couple of days, and that's when I first played Demon Crest. Oh my goodness, was I fucking blown away by Demon Crest. That was a fantastic game. And that's when I played my favorite Super Nintendo game of all time, Turtles in Time. I absolutely love Turtles in Time. Favorite Super Nintendo game of all time. I also played Super Smash TV there, which is a fantastic, underrated game. Oh man, that game is a classic. Hidden Gem might be an episode. Take a little shot to that one. But he let me borrow Pokemon Blue. Well, he gave me Pokemon Blue, and I was like, really? He's like, yeah, take them. And he's like, hold on a second, I got one more thing for you. And he went inside and got me the light attachment for the Game Boy. And I was like, dude, he's like, go home, play it, and we'll meet back up tomorrow. So all night I played Pokemon Blue, and we had just moved into the house, so thank God my dad had bought extra batteries because I needed it. But I never lose that memory of him being so nice to me and giving me the Game Boy and Pokemon Blue, and that Game Boy traveled with me for years until my dad, finally caved in and bought, a Game Boy Color, or at that time the Game Boy Advance was coming out. So I just remember that amazing memory of him being so nice to me and giving me, Pokemon Blue, and just that night when I was just in my bed with the light. Thank God he gave me the light, but just with the light, and I was just gaming the shit out of it. Oh man, what a great experience. So guys, I just wanted to come here and talk about a little bit of a gaming memory of how I ended up, getting my first Game Boy and getting Pokemon Blue, which is my favorite Pokemon game, if that doesn't make sense, because it was given to me as the first one I ever played, and it had my favorite Pokemon on it, Blastoise. So it was just such a magical moment. And I ended up, when I ended up going to his house and stuff later on, we used to play wrestling toys together. He would bring out the big Fisher-Price castle, and he had G.I. Joe toys, and we would just play with the G.I. Joe toys. And he was a couple years older than me, maybe 4 or 5 years older than me, so he had all those cool stuff like that. And man, just what a memory, man. I hope he's doing well. It just sucks when you're growing up and people move away. You just lose contact, but I will never forget that memory of him giving me my first Game Boy and my first experience with the Pokemon game, and being so grateful for it. And I want to know your guys' story. What was your story with your Game Boy? Were you lucky enough to get one handed down to you? Or did you get one for free like me? Or were you lucky enough to open it up on a birthday or Christmas morning? I want to know. Comment below, and I will see you next week for another episode.